Hey guys, welcome to Womenstrual, a series of conversations about the ebbs and flows, literally and metaphorically, of life, and a safe space to discuss periods. Welcome to episode 1. I'm Candace, your host and the founder of the Gynae Project. And to kick off, I thought it would be good to take a trip down memory lane to see how this all came about for me, and why the Gynae Project exists and what my experiences have been with menstruation and my periods in general. I'm definitely going to be looking at my phone, and I've got resources here as well. So if you see me looking down, there's a lot to cover. So firstly, we'll start with kind of when I started my period. So I started my period in primary school. I definitely don't remember the exact age, but it definitely was primary school age. And I remember the day I started, I actually thought I was dying, because as much as I'd actually been bought a book by my parents, I can't remember the timescale, but I'd been bought a book by them about the basics of starting your period. So I was kind of reading it and I kind of understood what was going on. But then when it actually happened to me, I was like, what is going on? Why is this happening to me? Am I going to collapse right here, right now? Obviously, I was not going to collapse right there, right now in that moment. And my parents were both really empathetic and understanding and kind of informed me that, okay, you're coming into your womanhood. This is basically what the book we gave you is all about. I took the day off school and I remember they took me to my local town and we went for something to eat, and then we came back home and I kind of just was, taught a little bit more about what I can expect moving forward. I went to buy period products with my mum and then came home and then kind of was like feeling it out, trying to figure out, okay, cool, so this is going to happen for the rest of my life, is what I thought at the time. And then kind of, just started to just get used to it, I guess. I think for most of us, most women and girls in particular, I think there's a stark percentage of us, especially based on the data that the Gynae Project has collated, that really after maybe an initial conversation with parents or at school, there wasn't really much conversation after that. So following when I started my period, I remember just kind of going through school, and just keeping it really discreet. I used to hide my pads in here, like most of us did or still do. And whenever I needed to go to the toilet, I started to find a little bit of a rhythm for when I needed to change. And I remember one day we had a supply teacher and I just knew I really needed to go to the toilet. But in primary school, you have to ask to go to the toilet. I don't know if this is the same case in secondary school now or in school in general, but I put my hand up to go to the toilet and he didn't let me. So I kind of just like awkwardly just like sat there and kind of looked around and thought, oh my days, this is so awkward because I really need to go to the toilet. And then some time passed and then I put my hand up again and I was like, oh, sir, like I really need to go to the toilet. And he didn't let me again. So I was like, this is getting really annoying and awkward. But by the time I'd got to the toilet, it was murder on the dance floor. Literally murder on the dance floor. And it took me ages to just try to like get over the shock, and like try to sort myself out. I always bought spare underwear to school because my cycle and my period was so heavy. Like I would just leak through my underwear, leak through onto my clothes all the time. So I then got changed in the toilet and then came out, and that process kind of took maybe 15, 20 minutes. And then when I went back into the classroom, the teacher was like, why did you take so long? Where did you go? Blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And I felt really, really, really embarrassed because he was saying this in front of class. I also went to a mixed school, so that also didn't help. And I just remember feeling like, wow, is this actually what I have to go through like every single month for the rest of my life? Like this feeling of shame, this feeling of embarrassment, this feeling of like not really being understood or not really being, in a lot of ways, allowed to just be human. Because for women and girls, like that is something that we go through as part of our human experience. So in a lot of ways, I really felt like, wow, like part of my humanity is kind of being taken away. But I distinctly remember kind of fast forwarding quite a bit to when I was auditioning for uni. So I auditioned to study dance. So I come from a dance background. For those of you that know me well, you will know that. But yeah, I come from a dance background. So when I was auditioning for uni, I remember I was on day 2 of my period. I remember day 1 at that age and stage was like kind of just more painful than it was heavy. But day two said we're here and we're live and we're active. So by the time I got to that audition, I literally was just praying that like I could just get through the audition and not experience any of the heaviness and the pain and the tiredness and all of that. That was not the case. The audition was an hour and a half and I danced maybe for 20 minutes, like in total, not even 20 minutes continually. So I did the warm up. But then after that, I had to go to the toilet. I was being sick. I just felt so unwell. I think it was also a combination of nerves, but I just felt so unwell. I tried to do my best. And then we went through a couple of little bits of routine and I tried to stay in the room to just learn the bits that I could pick up. And then we had like a freestyle bit at the end. And I thought, do you know what, Can? Like, if you can't pick up the routine, like routine is something that you can be taught over time, especially if you get accepted to uni. But really the freestyle is where you get to exhibit like what your skill actually is and what your how you move when you're kind of given the agency to do so. So the freestyle bit, like I kind of picked up bits of the routine, but the freestyle bit, I literally pulled every bit of energy that I had and I literally, it sounds cliche, but I left it all on the dance floor. I left it all on the dance floor. And then afterwards, I went over to one of the teachers and said, I'm really sorry. I just feel really unwell today. I hope that it's okay. And I kind of did that like awkward, like, oh my gosh, da 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 type of thing. And then I'll never forget it. She looked at me and she said, you've done enough. And then as I walked out, I was like, okay, I guess that's that. And then as I went home with my mum, I was like, yeah, I hardly did any of the audition. I literally danced the warm up, a little bit of the routine, and then did the freestyle bit at the end. And then I actually got accepted. So I think in a lot of ways, that was really reassuring. Her confirmation, which I didn't really see as confirmation at the time, of telling me that I've done enough, despite really not having done a lot at all. And then fast forwarding on to after uni, I also remember kind of from a dance perspective, especially when I did ballet in particular, our tights were pink. My period is really, really heavy and has been like most of my life. And I remember I used to get like stains on my tights. It wasn't like massively obvious to the outside of myself. Like I could see it, like when I took my leotard off, but like other people in the class wouldn't be able to see it. And I just remember also feeling like, this is really embarrassing. And it also kind of begs the question, kind of inclusivity when it comes to ballet and kind of more traditional forms of dance and traditional ways that dance is expressed and the representation in that, because I think had I had like skin color tights, that wouldn't have been as obvious to me. And I also wouldn't have felt the embarrassment because I used to go to dance 5 days a week, 4 days in the week and 1 day at the weekend for theatre school. So I was constantly kind of in and out of those tights, in and out of those tights. So there's also that I remember quite distinctly about how my period had showed up in my life and just like thinking about, is this just me or is this kind of like normal for people? But at that time, and even to a large degree now, like those questions kind of still remained at that time unanswered. It got to about, I'm fast forwarding quite a lot here, but it got to maybe 2016 and I felt like, okay, something is really not right. I remember just feeling like my life was really crippled when I was on my period and I was in my menstrual phase. I just felt so tired. I was in so much pain. I was also passing clots. So if anyone does or doesn't know what that is, it's where the flow of your blood doesn't come out all at once. It kind of gathers and then comes out in kind of like it kind of looks like jelly. And it can be really uncomfortable. And that was happening to me as well. I just remember thinking, does everyone else go through this? Because I'm looking at my friends and they're just kind of cracking on with life. And I didn't really feel like anyone else was kind of experiencing period pain and cramps and discomfort in the same way I was. I thought, what are they doing that I'm not? Why does this happen to me, etc., etc. So I then decided, you know what, I think I should go to my GP. I think that's the right route to go. So I'm just going to speak to my doctor about what I'm experiencing and if there's any way she can essentially help. So When I went to my GP, she referred me on to a gynecology consultant, well, essentially a gynecologist, who then I talked to about like, look, like I've got really heavy periods. This is happening to me, and I just feel really, really uncomfortable. Is there anything that you can do? Is there any way that you can kind of steer me in the direction of finding out why this might be happening and what I can do to prevent it and cure it if there is something that needs to be cured. And I've, for a long time, and it almost feels like everything that I'd done since from 2016 in particular was leading me to this point, because I actually have kept all of my medical letters with regards to my gynae concerns since then. So I have one. And I remember after going to my GP, I got a letter to say, we have seen Candace Oxley. She is a 26-year-old lady who has regular cycles and has come to us with complaints of dysmenorrhea, which is basically a medical term for painful periods. For the past 6 to 7 months, she's been having painful periods in the past. She's been having painful periods in the past as well, but the past 6 months the pain has worsened. The pain started alongside her bleeding, and it was especially bad on day 3 and day 4 of her periods. That's still the same, to be fair. It is mainly spasmodic in nature. Her periods are believed to be heavy with passage of clots. She usually uses 5 to 6 tampons a day, and her cycles are 6 days long. She's not a smoker and does not take alcohol. She was not keen for an examination, so no examination was done. We discussed in detail about the causes of spasmodic dysmenorrhea. Since she does not have any structural causes seen in the scan, this can be a normal psychological pain which is a bit exaggerated because of slightly increased bleeding. We discussed the options of non-hormonal treatment with tranexamic acid and mefenamic acid to be taken from day 1 to day 6 of her periods. And other choice was to go for hormonal medications, which are mainly combined pill, which has the additional advantage of contraception. I'm actually reading this as it's written, so it's not just me like sounding a bit mad. We discussed the pros and cons, and I decided to go with the non-hormonal treatment. Her scan has shown a 2.6 centimeter right ovarian cyst. I've also explained that cysts less than 3 centimeters are considered as functional, and they may be part of a corpus luteal cyst, and they may appear hemorrhagic if there is a small bleed happening in the corpus luteum. I reassured the patient that we are discharging her from our clinic. I have advised her that in future, if she has any problem, she needs to come to you and can always be referred back to us. So that was kind of the first consultation I had with a GP with regards to menstrual cycle and my concerns there. So I was then prescribed tranexamic and mefenamic acid to support with the flow of my period and also the pain. And baby, I felt like a new woman, honey. Literally, I felt like I just got my life back. I was feeling great. I wasn't feeling any pain. The flow had lessened. I was living my life. I felt fantastic. And then my body started getting used to it. I was also prescribed 2 tablets of each to take 3 times a day. So when you do the maths, that's 12 tablets a day. It's a lot of pills. And then when I started doing the maths, I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to reduce it to 1 of each 3 times a day, which is still 6. Again, a lot of tablets. So I started to really dial it back. And instead, I started to take them on the days that were heaviest. So instead of taking it the whole time, I'd kind of maybe take them on day 2 to prepare my body for day 3, and also on day 3 to prepare my body for day 4. And then after that, I kind of just would, in a lot of ways, grin and bear it. Body started getting used to it. I was thinking, okay, this concern is more concerning than I initially anticipated. So in a lot of ways, the tablets initially were an opportunity for me to see whether this would just help. It wasn't a cure. It was kind of something to pacify the pain and the flow that I was experiencing, which it did. But once my body started getting used to it, I was like, yeah, I think something deeper is going on here. So following that, I was then recommended to go and have blood tests, ultrasounds, and transvaginal scans. So yeah, blood tests pretty self-explanatory. Ultrasounds again fairly self-explanatory. Transvaginal scans is when they do a scan and they put a probe they use an internal probe and then they can scan you from inside. That usually gives a clearer picture. So I was having those for like maybe once every 3 or 4 months for maybe 2 years to just try to figure out what was happening. So by this point, we are at 2019. We got to 2020 and then obviously the world shut down. So that was the end of that. We got to 2021 and then I kind of resumed with the scans and like blood tests and all of that kind of stuff. They were kind of testing me for so many things. And then they finally found like what might be wrong. And they saw cysts, polyps, and a small fibroid. The cyst was 2.6 centimeters, as I said before. The fibroid was 2 centimeters, and I had like a number of polyps, which are like small growths. A little bit, they kind of, I don't know if they come from the same family as cysts and fibroids, but they kind of operate in a similar way to my understanding. I'm not a medical professional, but this is just me as a layperson trying to make sense of what's going on. I hope you're with me still. I know it's a lot of information, but I think it's important to share kind of what my experience has been like and open up the space for people to do the same. So after that, I was then written to have 3 different treatments: a hysteroscopy, a biopsy, and a polypectomy. So the hysteroscopy is what was going to take out the cysts. The polypectomy was what's going to take out the polyps. And a biopsy is just kind of to see what was going on. From my understanding, it's similar to a transvaginal scan, but kind of more in depth. And so now we're at 5 years as this process goes on. Did everything I needed to do beforehand, etc. And I went in, and I actually went into theatre. And this was the first time I realised I was going into theatre. And for anyone who's been into theatre, it's a really overwhelming experience. And for anyone who hasn't been into theatre before, it literally looks like ER. There are bright lights everywhere. There's tools everywhere. And there's maybe 4 or 5 nurses and a consultant in a room kind of waiting for you. And I just felt so overwhelmed. Like, what is happening? Like, why was I not briefed on what this process was going to be like? And in a lot of ways, yes, patients do have a responsibility to kind of ask questions. But to my knowledge, I'd asked all the questions I felt like I needed to ask at that point. Going into theatre is a really big deal. I thought I was going to be going into I didn't think I was going into theatre. That's what I do know. I thought I was just going to go into like a different kind of room and not be as overwhelming as that. So when I got there, I was kind of like ushered onto the bed, and then the consultant kind of just got straight to it. And as he began, the pain of him putting the whatever tool it was at the time internally, not under GA or local, literally caused me to like burst out into tears. It was like probably the most painful medical procedure that I've ever experienced. And in a lot of ways, it felt just like, and you know what? I just felt so unprepared. And because I felt unprepared, I was even more tense. And then as the procedure was continuing, I literally was like, I actually feel like I can't do this. Like, I genuinely cannot do this. So then the nurses were around me, and then there was one nurse who looked like maybe about my age, and she held my hand throughout it. And then I looked at her, and I was just in floods of tears and streaming, and she was like, I think we need to start. And then he literally just like rolled away on his chair and then rolled back to his seat. And then bearing in mind, I'm still in tears. I feel like almost traumatized. Like, I just feel so vulnerable. I feel like on the cusp of violation because, again, I felt like I was so underprepared in terms of what I was walking into. And then I kind of was ushered out with 2 nurses, and again, in floods of tears. This was also during the pandemic, so you couldn't bring anyone with you. Fortunately, my mum had a blood test at the same hospital as me that day, and I genuinely feel like that was God. As I was walking out, I just kind of turned around to like look at the consultant, and he literally was just on the chair like this, on his phone, and I thought, this is actually like really, really intense. And there's not even like a turn around and say, hopefully we'll see you again next time. Sorry, we couldn't do it this time. He literally rolled away off the chair and said, I guess we're not doing it then. And then I was like, like literally like, you know, that cry where you can't even speak, you're losing your breath, like you literally feel like I might faint. And that was just awful. And I remember being led back to the room, and the nurse stayed with me, and I was just like, I couldn't even speak. Like, and then she kind of left me alone, and then kind of got redressed, and I met my mum outside, and my mum was on so much smoke. She was like, where's the guy? Da, 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 all of this. And I was just like, I just want to go home. Like, I just want to go home. And then I just spent the rest of the day just like, you know, when you're just thinking about like your life and you just lie down and look at the ceiling and just like, you're just in that kind of like, almost like phantasmagoric, like, oh, was this a dream? Was this a reality? Like, this really just happened to me? Like, all of that. And yeah, in a lot of ways, I was like, this is awful. And I would not wish this on anyone. And then there was a part of me that felt like, oh, like, am I too weak? Because how come I couldn't withstand the pain? Like, how come I couldn't just go through with it? And then I started to like beat myself up a bit. And then naturally my doctor called me to just see how it went. And obviously I didn't go through with it. And I told her that I didn't go through with it. And I told her that it was just really painful. And I just was in floods of tears. And I just kind of felt really like, yeah, vulnerable, and just like I felt like massively underprepared. And she said, you know what, Candace, I'm really proud of you, because a lot of women in a lot of situations just grin and bear that, and you don't have to. And I recognize that that narrative from my GP is so uncommon. I have got so much time for my doctor, because she has absolutely advocated for me this whole process and done everything that she could to make sure that I got seen to, that I had the relevant scans done, that I had the relevant tests done, that I kept going. And she really, honestly, like, I've asked her to come on this pod a few times and she's kind of a little bit nervous. So when she does, because I'm sure she will, please show her love and grace. But she has been like like just one of the most integral people to this journey. So then after that, we had that conversation and I told her about what happened. I then received a letter from the hospital to say, this lady came for an outpatient hysteroscopy but could not continue with the procedure. I got as far as inserting a small speculum which confirmed the ectopy. She then asked for us to stop, and therefore the planned procedure was abandoned. I've arranged for her to have a repeat scan, and if this still suggests thickening of the endometrium, we will arrange a GA procedure. First of all, I was like, just say Candace came in as opposed to this lady. Obviously, I was just vexed because I thought this man ain't got no like sensitivity or empathy for this situation. So after that, I spoke to my GP and said, look, like, I really want to still go ahead with this treatment and this procedure, but are there any female gynecologists that do it? And then she said, yeah, but she only does theatre every 6 months. Guess what my answer was? I'll wait. So I then had, at the time, she was doing theatre in 4 months' time. That was like her 6-month period. I was already like 2 months into it, if that makes sense. Excuse me. So I then waited another 4 months and got a new appointment in the beginning of 2022. At this point, I asked loads more questions, and I was able to ask more questions because of what I'd been through. So I understood what it might be like. I felt a lot more prepared. When I got to the hospital, every single person that was doing something that pertained to this procedure, from me walking in the door to me walking out the door, came into the room and explained to me who they were and the role they played. And that made such a difference. I had the guy who was literally walking me from my room to the section before you go into the theatre come in and say to me, hi, my name is Dr. This, and I'll be walking you from here to the room before you go into theatre. Good to meet you. I had the nurse come in and said, hi, my name is this, and I'm going to be doing X. I had the next person come in and say, hi, my name is this, and I'll be giving you the GA. Hi, my name is this, and I'll be doing that. And again, a lot of that, I think, was because I had asked different questions, because I'd already been through a treacherous experience. And it begged me to question, like, how can people not have to go through a madness in order to know what they need to prepare for? And this is not just from a medical perspective, but just from a wider life perspective. And I guess the answer to that in a lot of ways is that experience is the best teacher. And I think in a lot of ways it's encouraged me not only in that type of situation, but just in life to advocate for myself 10, 100 times more. So once everybody had kind of come into the room and explained who they were and explained what they're doing, then the consultant came in. She came in and said, "Hi, I'm XYZ person. I'll be doing your procedure today. We understand the history of what you've gone through, so I just want to reassure you that this is what we'll be doing and this is what will happen. When you get into theatre, you'll be given this, and then after that, you'll be wheeled in. The procedure takes X amount of time. After that, you'll be wheeled back, and then you can stay in the room. I'm an outpatient, so it's unlikely that I have to stay overnight. But should that change, you'll stay here overnight, and then you can go home the next day. But you should be good to go home afterwards. It usually takes you X amount of time to come out of the GA, blah, blah. And I literally felt like this is what the experience should be like. This is already nerve-wracking enough. I want to have as much information about what's happening as possible, especially because I'm going under general anesthetic, and I'd never been under general anesthetic before. So that happened. And then I was walked into the pre-room before going into theatre. Last time I was kind of walked straight into theatre. So that's even just showing you a difference in experience. So I was walled in and then I laid on the bed. And then they said, "Okay, cool, we're going to give you the general anesthetic now." And they initially tried it in my vein over here. So the liquid to go I think it's like a liquid to go in here and then essentially just makes your body go all numb. And he said to me, within a couple of seconds, you won't even hear me talking anymore. So then he put the needle in and said, "Oh, your hair looks nice." And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much." And he said, "Oh, what do you do for work?" And I remember thinking, this man said in a few seconds, I'm not going to be able to hear him. I can still hear him. I said, "Oh my gosh, I can still hear you. I can still hear you. Stop, I can still hear you." He was like, "Okay, don't worry." And then they said, "Okay, this one's not working." So they put a mask on me instead. And literally, he put the mask on my face and I said, literally in no time whatsoever. So after that, I went in for the procedure and I came out. I felt very dazed afterwards, as you do when you kind of go under GA. And I spent maybe an hour or so in the room I was in and then went home. But what's interesting about GA is that it really interferes with your hormonal and emotional balance. So afterwards, I just found that I was crying at everything that day and the next day. Someone would ask me how I was. They say, "Oh, Can, how are you doing?" I'd be like, "I'm fine. I really am fine. But I'm really good to speak to you." And it was just mad. Like my mom would be like, "Do you want something to eat?" And I'd be like, "Thank you. Yeah, I do. Thank you." And literally, I would cry over anything. And my friend sent me a clip of this girl because I was telling her, "Sis, I just keep crying over everything, and it's so annoying because I don't actually feel like crying, but I just keep crying." And she sent me a clip of this lady who also went under general anesthetic, and when she came out, she was really upset that people don't sing a particular nursery rhyme anymore. I can't remember what the nursery rhyme was. Say, for example, it was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. She would, in the clip, someone's like, "Why are you crying?" She was like, "Why don't people sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star anymore? I'm just really sad. Like, why?" And I was literally cracking because I was like, that was me. Anything anyone asked me over those next 2 days literally would bring me to tears. Good, bad, indifferent. I was like, this is so annoying. But I was just glad that the procedure had happened. So now I'm thinking, great, I'm good to go. And then when my next period came, it was like nothing I've ever experienced. It was heavier than it's ever been, more uncomfortable than it's ever been. Like if I was not changing on the hour, forget it. And it was becoming really frustrating because I'd be doing things like getting in the car and driving somewhere. By the time I'd got to the place, I had to change. By the time I'd ordered food and eaten food, I had to change again. By the time we'd got from one place to another place, I had to change again. And I was literally changing maybe 8 times a day. And I thought, this is so disappointing because I went through all of that. Also, you have to remember it's 2022. This conversation started in 2016. So we're now 6 years in and my period is worse. So I was like, this is actually awful. Like, how can this be the case? And then I started to think, do you know what? Let me speak to my GP again because I need to tell her that I went through all of that and I'm no better off. And in doing that, she said, do you know what? Because you've interfered in that area, there might be some tears. So that's what's causing the blood to be a lot heavier. It should ease off over time, but that's just like some additional context. And after that, it did start to wear off a little bit, but I do remember still feeling like the same type of pain, the same type of heaviness, especially on day 3 and day 4. Kind of went through all of that again, and I thought, this is so disappointing. And then it kind of begged me to question, okay, cool. I've kind of been through the medical system in trying to find answers and create and like put myself in the best possible position to get results and to kind of not be in this like grappling position every month. And then I thought, what other agency can I take when it comes to my period to better align it with the life I want to live from a vitality point of view? And I started just doing some like maths. And I remember I stopped dancing at 25. And 25, I was 25 in 2015. The gynae issues got worse in 2016. And I thought to myself, yeah, how does movement connect with my menstrual cycle? And I realized, you know what? I think there might be something in this. So I started to look at lifestyle changes I could make that have a direct impact on not only my overall vitality, but how my period then shows up. And I found that I immediately, like within 3 months, and that's pretty immediate when you're looking at something that you've experienced for, 15 plus years, saw a difference in my period generally. In my luteal phase, so the phase before your menstrual phase, I'm not as tired, I'm not as sluggish for as long. So I might feel that maybe 1 or 2 days before as opposed to a week before. I've now found that my period isn't as painful, which is a bit annoying because I used to attribute heaviness with pain. And now because it's not as painful, I have to really stay on top of my schedule of like when to change, etc., etc. But I have massively found that dialing into some lifestyle changes, i.e. nutrition, movement, not necessarily exercise like in the traditional sense, but moving my body, management of stress and rest in particular, I've really seen a difference in my period. Now, like moving forward to present day, my period is a lot easier to manage. I still have heavier days, but I definitely feel like the experiences of my late teens and most of my 20s is no longer the experience I now have in my 30s. And I think a lot of it for me is attributed to the lifestyle changes I've made. I am still looking at how I can reduce the pain altogether, and still meeting with consultants about that. I actually had another scan maybe two or 3 weeks ago. By the time this comes out, it'll be 2 or 3 weeks ago, just to kind of keep on top of it. And that's even something I would encourage, because I think the more people that try to keep on top of their gynecological health, the more demand there'll be. And for me, when demand meets data, there has to be change. So in a lot of ways, my encouragement to anyone would be just to speak to your GP about going to see a gynecologist, just to have a kind of checkup, and see what's going on. The average wait is 6 months, but in the meantime, you can definitely be doing some things in terms of lifestyle to better adjust, and not allow it to be completely crippling. And this is coming from someone who doesn't have a completely diagnosed gynecological concern, because I know that is a very different lived experience. So shout out to my girlies on that front. But I think in a lot of ways, optimizing your lifestyle has benefits either way. It has benefits regardless. And that for me is what the Gynae Project is also about. It made me ask the question, like, how many other women and girls are experiencing the same thing I did, don't really know where to go. It's not clearly signposted for them. And from a community level, how many other women could just do with a safe space to discuss it? And how could the access to gynecological care and education be improved? Hence the Gynae Project. So the Gynae Project was built off of all that experience. And essentially, the overarching aim is to help women and girls have improved and routine access to menstrual care and education. For something that happens so regularly in our bodies, for me, it's essential that the care and education is just as regular. So this podcast serves as an educational tool to have different guests on to talk about ebbs and flows of life, because life happens, but also a safe space to discuss periods, any concerns or not concerns, and just knowledge around the topic. So I really hope that this is something that you will lean into and enjoy. I've really enjoyed learning more about women's health overall, and I hope that you enjoy the journey. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated, please share and get in touch as well. There'll be more information in the show notes, and we're actually collating new data for an upcoming report, which I'll also put in the show notes as well. But yeah, I'm Candace, and it's been a pleasure to share this with you. All right, love you. Bye.